And welcome to the Mehalshick Files on the 2822 Now app. We are streaming here from our streaming center, our podcast center in downtown Wilkes-Barre. Andy Mehalshick, our special guest today. And we're talking, first of all, about the George Banks mass murder on September 25th of 1982, a crime that still is talked about. People still look at the numbers, how horrific it was. 13 people killed, including, I believe, it was 7 children, 5 of his own children, George Banks. You'll be informed, educated on that crime, and also commentary today from my special guest, Luzerne County District Attorney Sam Sangodoshi. Thanks again, Sam, for coming in here today.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
Dave, and two veteran, only I could tease these guys and say I grew up watching them on TV, right?
Thanks.
Not actually,
we don't feel old enough already, Andy. Thank you very much. Yes.
So Dave DeCosmo, a longtime TV reporter at WYU TV, and also worked here at 2822 News. Right. Mark Davis, also a legendary TV reporter, also worked here at Eyewitness News.
As executive producer, yeah.
And executive producer, and both of these gentlemen covered at length the George Banks, I'll call it a massacre, tragedy. There's not enough words to describe how bad that situation was. And I, under full disclosure, was just starting to work in radio back in 81 and 82. So I actually covered it part-time for Hazelton radio station and for the Wilkes College radio station back then. So I was still learning the business, but one of the first stories I covered on the periphery, not like these guys, though, by any means.
I covered it from start to finish, from day one to the verdict, the whole thing. Jury selection, went to Pittsburgh, the whole shooting match.
And the story is so fascinating. And I know even in a podcast, an hour or so, we're not going to get to every angle, but every little detail. But it's really something that is, when you hear about these mass shootings around the country, Sam and Dave and Mark, and sometimes a lot of our younger generation coming in will say, boy, we've been fortunate we haven't had that happen in northeastern Pennsylvania. And then sadly, I have to remind them or inform them, check out 1982, September of 1982, 13 people killed in Wilkes-Barre. It was 7 children and 5, he was father of those 5 of the children. Sam was just a young kid at the time. Think about how we're still talking about this, Sam. You're the chief prosecutor in Luzerne County, handled all kind of cases like Hugo Selinsky, and we're still talking about George Banks after 43 years.
Yeah, I mean, this is the largest mass shooting in Pennsylvania to this day. Not that it's something to be proud of, but think of the magnitude of such a case on what was small and innocent in Wilkes-Barre City. And now we've seen a number of things since then. I think a lot more coverage around the country probably is a cause for us seeing more of it, at least a little bit. But this is a case that still goes down in the annals of Luzerne County history, and we still refer back to it because of the magnitude of the case and the sheer volume of documents that resulted prior to trial.
And we'll be talking about, we were talking about just the records in this case alone, second only to Hugo Selinsky.
Correct.
And you can check out our podcast on Hugo Selinsky also, and Sam provided to 2822 News exclusive video of the crime scene, the graveyard that was his backyard up in Kingston Township. But that's another podcast issue. Today, George Banks. Let's give a quick background piece. I did this package a couple of days ago, just a brief summary of the crime of that day, September 25th, 1982, and some recollections from Dave and Mark. It was the unthinkable, and it happened in northeastern Pennsylvania. George Banks went on a murderous rampage, shooting and killing 13 people, including 7 children. He was father to 5 of those children. He shot 8 people inside a home on Schoolhouse Lane in Wilkes-Barre. He shot 2 men who just happened to be walking down that lane that night. One of them died. Banks shot 4 other people at a home in Jenkins Township. Among the adults he murdered, his girlfriends and mothers of his children. Gerard DeSoy was one of the first Wilkes-Barre police officers to enter the house on Schoolhouse Lane. He remembers what a fellow officer said.
He uttered something to the effect of, oh God, or oh dear, or whatever. And he said, we have bodies in here. And we all made our way in. And of course, there were a multitude of bodies on the first floor.
Banks held police at bay at a home on Monroe Street in Wilkes-Barre, eventually surrendering. Al Flora was Banks' defense attorney and talks about the motive for that rampage.
He perceived that there was going to be a racial war and that he actually shot his family to protect them from the racial war that he perceived was coming.
Dave DeCosmo and Mark Davis were television reporters, and both were there when Banks surrendered.
I remember one of the officers saying, "You better stand over here because here you're still in his sights." And we were that close.
Being so close to that kind of activity, I was scared. I was apprehensive.
Banks was convicted of 12 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, but a judge ruled him incompetent to be executed. You can see all the reporting on the Banks case on 2822news.com. Reporting for the I-Team in Wilkes-Barre, Luzerne County, Andy Mehalshick, 2822 News. Okay, that's just a quick background piece on we ran last week. So when you see that, Dave and Mark, what goes to your mind when you're looking at those images?
I mean, it's one of the biggest story that probably either one of us covered in our entire careers. But, and you'll know this, Andy, when you first get the call that this has happened, you just go and do your job. You don't have a chance. I didn't break down until after I did my last live shot at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock that night. Then it hit me, what I had seen, what I had heard, and what had been done. But during the day, you're just consumed with doing the best job you can, given this catastrophic killing.
Well, in my case, we were summoned to a particular street in Wilkes-Barre, my cameraman and I, and all the police were gathered around there because they thought they had seen him in the area. All of a sudden, the police got a call he might be somewhere else, and they left. And it hit me at that moment that what if he was still in that area? My cameraman and I were still standing there. A little later, they thought he might be at his mother's house. And there was a big field between where the police had their staging area and where we were. We had to go across that field in front of the house to get to where the police were. And all that time you're thinking you might be in his sights. Then, of course, as I mentioned once before within the package that you showed us, that I was literally in my suit lying on the ground 2 houses away holding my microphone out, recording Robert Munson, who talked him out. And that, by the way, is a whole separate story. We probably can get into it, but I think if there was an unsung hero that day, that gentleman who talked him out would be the man.
And we came this close to not having a trial because a sharpshooter for the Wilkes-Barre Police Department had Banks in his sight, asked Chief John Swim if he could take the shot, and the order was not given.
Yeah, the late Jim Zardecki County detective also had him in his sights.
Yep.
But Jim told me, Jim passed away not too long ago, unfortunately, and Jim told me that he would never have taken the shot because he was afraid if he wasn't absolutely sure he could take him out, kill him with that shot, he would have time to open up with that rifle. And there were so many people around. Granted, they were behind cars, and in my case, behind a porch. But you can never tell with the power of an AR-15 where those bullets are going to go. So the being able to talk him out was really saved the day for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Now, what kind of rifle did he have? And Sam, when you're looking at these images, again, 1982, police officers, no tactical gear at that point. County detectives, probably Wilkes-Barre police officers with rifles.
Single-shot rifles.
Did they know what they're up against, Mark?
I don't think they did. I mean, there was plenty of law enforcement there. There was people from everywhere. There were police cars everywhere. But I don't think they knew. I believe it was an AR-15, wasn't that?
Yeah, he actually laid that down on the porch when he surrendered. Mm-hmm. Brunson told him. Brunson came there.
Expound on that gentleman. Well, I've heard that name, but I never met him or never talked to him.
Robert Brunson was a friend of George Banks. They'd known each other for about 10 years. As a matter of fact, he talked Banks into applying for a job as a prison guard, which he got.
What prison did he work at? Do you remember? Was it greater?
They probably all started in Philadelphia. I'm not sure. But in any case, he got that job despite the fact he had served time himself for armed robbery. Mm-hmm. And Brunson had met him in, I believe it was a pool hall in the area. And he considered him a friend. Now, he walked down there on his own and talked with District Attorney Gillespie. And District Attorney Gillespie said, go ahead, give it a try. And Brunson came out there, and the first thing he said to him was, I know you're here to die, but before you die, I'd like to talk to you. And that got his attention. And Banks had told the woman whose son owned the home where he was holed up, he told that woman on the phone that he was there to die. Now, he didn't say whether it would be by his own hand or
Someone else's,
or
yeah.
by police action, but he was there to die. Brunson knew that, and basically walked out in front once he got the okay. Walked out in front and talked to him. I think for about 45 minutes.
40, 45 minutes, yep.
And then he finally gave up. Now, of course, in the interim, there had been another major side story to this.
The
And
radio
that was-
report, right?
That was the false radio report. And Pat Ward, who was at WILK at the time, and Roy Morgan, who was the general manager and part owner of WILK, agreed with the district attorney to broadcast a false report indicating that the children were all alive and needed blood transfusions, thinking that would get him out. As a longtime journalist, I know that their heart was in the right place by making that kind of request. I was not in a position to say yay or nay on it, but I knew that my boss would say no, because all that a journalist has is his credibility. And if you lose that credibility, then what's to say the next day you're not talking about a school board meeting and people are saying, well, did that really happen, or is somebody asking him to
But-
say that because?
You have to know different times, different circumstances. This was being asked by Bob Gillespie, who was very well respected by all of us. Probably one of the best
He was,
DAs.
he was a friend to all of us. Yeah.
A friend
Yeah.
to all of us, but he was a professional DA. And you know he wouldn't be asking if it was a serious, dire situation. And I think that had part of it to do because Bob had such a good relationship with all of us that we know he wouldn't ask unless it was a life and death situation, which literally it was.
And, it's interesting because, and quite honestly, I can see both sides of the argument as a reporter, as a
Yeah.
journalist,
Yeah.
but as a human being, if Sam comes up to me and says, if we do this, we may save lives. It may save lives.
That was a situation they were in because
And then
just
you're
think
thinking to yourself,
about it.
what's more important, the job or human life?
He's holed up in a house
So that's tough.
with God knows what weapons. You have probably dozens of police officers all there with their weapons drawn. The probability of a bloodbath was pretty high, both in loss of law enforcement officers as well as Banks. You don't know what would have happened if there'd been a gun battle. So you're weighing all of this in real time as it's playing out on the street in Wilkes-Barre that Saturday morning.
And Sam, take a DeLorean, go back in time. You're on the scene there now. Can you even, you can imagine this situation. Bob Gillespie, God rest his soul, a good friend of mine also from the Hazelton area. That's got to be a tough decision to make. I mean, there's lives in a balance. You're going to do what you have to do to save lives, right? That's the priority, save lives.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I think, like these guys both said, you can't put yourself in those shoes and second guess them. Like I've heard a lot, as I'm sure you have, about Banks should have been shot. They should have given the green light.
Oh, we heard
And
that for
Yeah.
weeks and weeks
who
after
would
this.
second guess, Jimmy Zardecki and the people making that call, living at that moment, making the decision on the spot with all the information
Right,
you have,
absolutely.
not 40 years of information later. Or so absolutely, and I know that we've done it. We've put out information that wasn't 100% true in order to save lives. Barricaded gunmen, which unfortunately we're seeing a lot. If they have a hostage in there. Now, we don't generally report it to all the media. It's information that we're sending into the House because you'll do anything to save the hostage and hopefully even save the gunman.
Yeah,
Obviously, they need help.
Let me say, although I have a tough time as a journalist with the request, I don't fault anybody for making it.
Right.
I think the question lies in making the decision as to whether you're going to air something. And I've always been told that, you have the integrity. You tell the truth or you say nothing. Also, and again, you're looking back, you're second guessing, as you indicated.
From 2025, looking back in 1982.
And we have all these years to have talked about it and discussed it.
Right.
But you're dealing with this in a barricaded situation in a populated area in South Wilkes-Barre. I can't imagine the pressure on all the law enforcement,
Everybody, yeah.
on Bob Gillespie to make that decision and to make that request.
And you already know, or at least had heard by that time, I would think, on Monroe Street, that there were children killed.
Yes.
Yes.
The word already got out. Now, could you imagine? We're going to take a break. Joey, Dominic, and Gabrielle Baker, our producers, shortly. Imagine, it's almost better social media wasn't there at the time like we have now.
Oh, the rumors
I mean,
would have been rampant.
that would have been rampant, but
Right.
wouldn't it
Yeah.
could fuel the whole situation, right?
And it made it worse. Yep. Yep.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to run a story. Yes, we went into the archives. Tony Gargiola, one of our senior photographers, if not the senior photographer, went into the catacombs of Eyewitness News, and we have some video of back in the day with Dave DeCosmo. And also, you can see the reporting style back then. It's still the business. You're still getting information out there. So it might be 43 years ago, but guess what? You look at that and say, they did a pretty good job, getting the word out there. So we'll be back with that after a short break. And welcome back to the Mehalshick Files on the 2822 Now CTV app. And that's the proper name, Joey Dominic, CTV app?
Yeah, 2822 now.
2822 Now. We're in the podcast world these days. We're doing all kind of what's great about these podcasts. We can talk more in depth about a variety of issues, topics, stories, you name it. As you've seen already, I'm sure with many of the stories, that local content already on our app, and that streams live every single day. Sports, weather, news, the Mehalshick Files, more of a hard-hitting type stories, that kind of thing. So today we're talking about the George Banks mass murder back on September 25th of 1982, and then years after, court cases. My special guest today, Luzerne County District Attorney Sam Sangaldoci, and no, he's not old enough to have prosecuted the case. But Sam is a very proactive prosecutor, and Sam's talking about how we're still learning. It's lessons learned from the George Banks murders, the investigation, and the prosecution. My other two special guests, Dave DeCosmo and Mark Davis, good friends and colleagues of mine who worked in various forms of media over the years. Dave and Mark covered this from day one, first opening hours of the event, and they're sharing their recollections of what happened that day. And again, keep in mind at the time, and I know Dave did the research on this, under full disclosure, it was the second, at the time in 1982, second largest mass murder in the history of the United States. There was one in Texas,
There was one in
1966.
Texas where someone shot 15 people. That was 1966.
1966. So you're still talking almost 20 years later, and it still ranks in the top 20 of mass murders in the country. And you're saying, Sam, still the biggest mass killing in Pennsylvania.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And we don't take pride in that. That's nothing to brag about, but it's something that is, after all these years, still has an impact in Pennsylvania. Let me run Dave. Now, Dave, my photographer, Tony Gargiola, found Dave DeCosmo's story package done back in 1982 at the Luzerne County Courthouse in the early days of the George Banks investigation. He had surrendered. He was facing murder charges. But this is Dave DeCosmo's package from 1982.
Forty-year-old George Banks of Wilkes-Barre was brought to the Luzerne County Courthouse under heavy security to be arraigned on 13 charges of murder and other charges related to a shooting spree in Wilkes-Barre and Jenkins Township on September 25th. Banks answered not guilty to each of the charges and asked for a jury trial. Judge Patrick Toole scheduled trial for Banks for Monday, February 28th. The district attorney told the court that Banks had refused to be fingerprinted while in custody of the Wilkes-Barre Township Police Department. The DA will ask the court to force him to submit to fingerprinting. The judge said that all such requests will have to be filed in pretrial motions. A court order prohibits officials from talking publicly about the Banks case, but most court observers believe there will be several pretrial motions, among them a request that the court move this case out of Luzerne County because of pretrial publicity. David DeCosmo, News Scene 22 at the Luzerne County Courthouse in Wilkes-Barre.
Dave was just a mirror boy at the time.
But he brings up a good point, because There was not a change of venue, but there was a change of where the jury would come
Change
from.
of veneer.
Veneer,
A
bring
veneer.
somebody in.
I went to Pittsburgh and for 2 solid weeks sat in a courtroom as they interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people to pick that jury and then bus them from Pittsburgh to Wilkes-Barre to do the trial.
And remember when he was holed up and the thought was he did want to die there? He was under suicide watch for quite some time while incarcerated.
Yep.
I remember we had some sort of a sketch that had been done with him behind bars, but they were still afraid he was going to take his own life and preclude the. When I say afraid of that, I think a lot of people probably would have welcomed that had he taken his own life. But I mean, the realistic, humane aspect is that you want him to go through a trial and face a jury, and right away, insanity was a thought as a plea. And yet he seemed so rational when he did
Testify.
speak. Yeah.
Yep.
He seemed very calm. Again, I came into this as a young radio reporter, so I didn't cover it by any means at the extent you guys did. But looking at all these file stories and doing anniversary pieces over the years, you talk to people who were involved in it and said, he seemed so calm that they almost couldn't believe that was the same George Banks who killed his own kids.
And to this day, he's still alive.
Now,
He's still in prison.
he was sentenced to death, but then years later through court battles, a judge, I think it was Judge Augello, or one of the judges,
Judge
Missouri County,
Conahan.
Judge Conahan
Judge
ruled
Conahan
that he
ruled
was
him
incompetent to be put to death,
Right.
which sounds
That was-
almost
It was a day before his scheduled
incomprehensible.
execution.
right.
And that decision came down.
I remember covering those. So Sam, when you see Dave's report, again, it's 1982, but it's the same concerns. It's almost like the same. The law doesn't change that much, but the humanity of it all. But the same concerns about change of venue, the jury, that kind of thing. So you're looking at that. Are you thinking about how would I handle it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at that video package. You know, my first thought is I've actually seen that, a dozen times at least. It looks exactly like we still do it today with the cameras awaiting
in the
them,
basement, right?
Right. And my gut reaction to that was, how do we do it now with social media? Because Pittsburgh is not far enough, right? Everybody, if this happened today, everybody in the country would see it, and yet we still manage to pick juries. Look at the Koberger case, and just recently happened. The nationwide media attention, and yet, they still would be picking
Well,
juries.
I've watched a lot of the documentaries on the Koberger case, and I kept saying to my wife, how were they ever going to pick a jury? Because there's documentaries, you can find 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 documentaries that go and talk to all the witnesses, all the people that were in Idaho that day, and how do you pick somebody who doesn't have any predetermined knowledge of the case when you ask those questions in voir dire?
And believe it or not, when we pick juries nowadays, you will get dozens of people. I don't watch the news. I don't watch those kind of stories. I have not formed an opinion, and I could be fair. Now, you got to ask a lot of other questions to see if that's the truth or not, because some people deliberately get themselves or try to get themselves implanted into the jury for
Absolutely.
the sake of having said it, or for whatever publicity, or for steering the verdict one way or another, not necessarily based on
Right.
the evidence. So it does become a lot more complicated with 24-hour news cycles and social media.
And it's interesting because and the whole voir dire process, I'm still amazed with that, okay? So Sam, and looking at that case as a backdrop, are there specific questions Bob Gillespie would ask a potential juror, whether it be, of course, being further away back then meant something. Now, 300 miles I don't think means
nothing,
anything.
yeah.
Right.
And I think generally speaking, though, at least the cases I've covered, and I was involved as a juror in a couple of civil cases, and sitting around the jury table, again, civil case, not George Banks, the majority of the people, you could pick out those who have an agenda. But the majority of the people, the cases I was involved in, on a very lower level, of course, degree of severity, they wanted to do a good job.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
knew about the case, they wanted to do a good job.
They take the duty seriously.
Right.
I've served on 2 juries, and I remember being questioned. Do you know the judge? Yes. Do you know the defense attorney? Yes. Do you know the prosecutor? Yes. Can you give an unbiased verdict? And I'll go back to my decision on not broadcasting a false report, and I say, pardon me. I say, I consider myself a fair newsman, get the facts, and then make a determination. I served on 2 criminal juries. Now, they're very small cases. And of course, the difference there is, as you, Mark said, the vast publicity on this one, so that people did know about it, whereas the cases I served on were not, not all that controversial.
Now, Sam, this trial happened less than a year after the incident, correct?
Yep.
In 2025, 2024, would it be that? I know there's a lot more legal maneuvers, I'm sure, but that was pretty close to the event, right? I mean, would that happen today, you think?
That was the most shocking for me as I went back to look at the case before coming here to talk about it, because I think I was in a sandbox when it happened. I don't have any personal knowledge of it, but yeah, I was shocked at how quickly it happened, and I'm just thinking, were this to happen today, just think about in all those locations, how many Ring cameras, cell phone videos. The other thing that Mark, and Dave mentioned were, social media. So immediately upon this happening, all the neighbors start wanting to come out of their house.
Yep.
This is an incredibly dangerous situation. We can't even necessarily, in such a situation like this, tape off a crime scene. I mean, because he's in there with a rifle, right?
Right, yep.
How do you keep people away? How do you manage that? There are people driving from all over, including news people, will be coming from Scranton, from Allentown,
Philadelphia, New York, yeah.
Within minutes of this thing being reported. So there are plenty of difficulties, but we would have dozens of more pieces of evidence because of all the video, the digital things that are out right now. And then, of course, those have to be documented. So reports come. So this is 16 bankers' boxes as it existed in 1982 into 83. If this were to happen today, it would easily be double that, because you need reports on all of those. Think of how much more testing there might be, DNA testing, how complex that is.
I'm sure your
fingerprints,
caseload has increased tremendously too.
It definitely has since then. I mean, the number of lawyers we have has increased, and the volume of evidence is increasing as well. So more people to handle more things.
And how do you, even with the Hugo Selinsky case, again, that's the topic of another one of our podcasts on the Mehalshick files. If you check it out, it's really fascinating. We talked about that case in depth. How do you get a jury? Because, for example, like the Selinsky case, I don't want to go down that road too much, but there were people who just wanted to see Hugo Selinsky. They thought he was a star. I'm not saying they had the same thing with George Banks, but how do you sort those folks out in a jury?
So one thing to keep in mind is in both of those cases, they were capital, meaning the death penalty was on the table, and you are permitted by law, required by law, in fact, to do individual voir dire, meaning you get to call each juror individually and ask them questions, and it's very liberal in the sense that the judge is supposed to let you investigate whether or not the juror can be fair. In most regular first-degree murder cases, it's not individual voir dire, so you're asking them as a group, maybe a few questions at sidebar, but you really can't delve into this person's knowledge or potential bias the same way as we got to as DA Gillespie did in Banks and as we got to do in Selinsky.
And I often wonder, and Bob Gillespie passed away a couple of years ago. In fact, his family has reached out to me the last couple of days when we were doing our pieces on George Banks. Is it safe to say he was a DA ahead of his time?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
He could prosecute today cases.
In fact, when he passed,
without the technology back then.
I was working in radio news at the time, and Pat Ward and I, along with Frank Andrews, did a whole hour that day about Bob, the day after he passed, because he was the most unique public servant I ever worked with in 45 years. He could tell you what he could tell you, but he also could tell you in a very nice way what he couldn't tell you. And he built up a trust with the media because he never pulled a fast one, never. And that's why when he made that request on that day for the fake newscast, some people went along with it because he had built up that bank of trust, the way he treated us, the way he gave us the information he could, and also told us the information he couldn't. And it takes a while to get that. And Bob was just the best DA or law enforcement person I worked with, because you'd go into his office and he'd see you right away. He always had time to talk to reporters. We didn't sit there and talk for hours, but you go in, you ask him a couple of questions, he'd give you what he could and what he couldn't do, and then
the public isn't able to go in and ask the district attorney all kinds of questions.
Right.
So the news media, that's our job. We go in and ask. And because there's so many legal restrictions, it's hard for a district attorney to know what he can say without jeopardizing the case.
Right.
Bob always knew what he could say without jeopardizing the case. He could give you that much, and he always had something to be able to tell you, unless there was one of those rare occurrences where the judge would impose a gag order, and no one was allowed to speak at all.
That's interesting. In this case, the gag order was the tightest you can imagine. Judge Patrick Toole, a wonderful judge, clamped things down from day one. You couldn't take any pictures on the third floor. Everything had to be downstairs. You couldn't talk to this one. You couldn't talk to that one. So the entire time, the attorneys, both defense and prosecution, could not say anything to the media at all.
We're going to take a quick break. And we have the DA sitting right here, so I want to talk to him about. And heaven knows I've phone called him several times and emailed and texted, hey, what's going on? And when you don't get a response, you know there's something going on. We'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, Andy Mehalshick, along with Sam Sangodoci, Luzerne County District Attorney, Dave DeCosmo, longtime veteran reporter, Mark Davis, longtime reporter. I look up to these guys a lot, and I mean that sincerely. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have another one-on-one interview that Dave did with George Banks in the Luzerne County Courthouse after this quick break. We'll be right back.
September 25th, 1982, George Banks is charged with the worst mass murder in the area's history. Today, June 21st, 1983, George Banks is found guilty on all charges.
This is Eyewitness News, the area's most complete coverage of today's events.
Dean Phillips.
Reported by Dean Phillips, Lori Lewis with the AccuWeather forecast, and Jim Miller on sports. Now, once again, here's Dean Phillips.
Good evening, and topping the news, of course, for you at this hour, as we told you first, guilty on 12 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of third-degree murder. That is the word indeed on George Banks tonight. Let's go to Kevin Jordan and Maureen Turney at the Luzerne County Courthouse and the live eye for this story. Kevin?
Dean, that's right. At 4:19 this afternoon, the jury foreman in the George Banks case began announcing the verdict, saying, "We, the jury, in the above-captioned case of the death of Regina Clemens, find the defendant George Emil Banks guilty of murder in the first degree." That was one of 7 first-degree murder counts that was announced in the beginning when the verdicts were announced in court.
And that was the late, great Kevin Jordan, a longtime reporter for WBRE TV and 2022 News.
Right.
Do you remember that day, Mark?
Absolutely, because I had made an agreement with Bob, Larry Climo, and Mike Bart that when the verdict broke and the gag order was lifted, I wanted the first interview. And they withheld that. They went live on the air with me to get the reactions to the verdict minutes after it happened. And that was something that we had built up. When you spend 2 weeks in Pittsburgh, 12 hours a day picking a jury, I said, I'd like to, do this. And Al Flora also was one of the first ones. We were one of the first ones to talk to him as well, because they could actually then comment on the proceedings. Until that time, they could not say
for the first
anything.
time in all those
those months.
Started, right?
Yeah. It was just an incredible day. And Andy, you've worked big stories. This was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, ever in Luzerne County. Courthouse was packed. There were people there. There were a lot of bystanders and everything else. It was bedlam, organized bedlam, but it was truly an incredible day.
Dave, your recollection of that day?
Well,
I know there's many, but what stands out?
Yeah, being that it ended finally at that point. Although at that juncture, everybody was pretty sure that the death penalty would be imposed.
Yes.
And of course, and it was not very last minute. And there were, of the 13 people killed, there were 12 death sentences and 1 life sentence. And here we are all these years later. He's still alive and well in prison. He's outlived a lot of the people who were involved in this case.
Just think of the drama in the courtroom with the verdict, and then, of course, the defense attorneys, the defense team, wanted every juror pooled individually, not only on the guilty verdict, but on the death penalty verdict. So you heard that 12 times from each juror.
Yeah, because
guilty. Yes for the death penalty. Yes for the death penalty.
when you ask them individually, there's always a chance you're not putting them on the spot.
Which is why they
and
ask.
they'll say, well, I didn't really want to go with that. And that'll change everything very quickly. So you have that right as the attorney.
I mean, I'm getting
to ask
goosebumps just talking about it now. I mean, it was like being in the middle of the most dramatic movie you could ever imagine. Only it was real life. It was happening in real time.
And Sam, what is the purpose of polling the jury? Like, no matter what they say, I mean, the case is done there. The verdict's handed down. Could that mean something on appeal, maybe?
Absolutely. So it's not necessarily done because the verdict's got to be unanimous. So if you had a situation, for example, where someone says they were bullied into the verdict, or what's reflected on the verdict slip is not actually true. I said not guilty, but they wrote down guilty. Now,
Or it was misread or something.
I've never seen any such thing. Every time I've seen the polling, it's come back consistent. But I think that's what the protection is.
And what? Okay, here's one for you. What courtroom was it in? Was it in the same courtroom for all those? The trial was in the same courtroom on the
And
third
you got
floor.
the elevator. It was courtroom number 2 or 3, whatever's on the right-hand side.
And the reason I'm asking that is, and I'm with today with these things, you could get, and I'm sure we've covered things like Sandusky trial, Penn State, Selinsky and stuff, where the restrictions on cell phones and whatever, you had to shut them off or whatever. But as soon as the verdict was reached, then all bets were off, and people were, I hate to say it, risking contempt of court and emailing out. You still can't use video in cameras in Pennsylvania or phones, but as soon as they bolt out that door, and I learned as a young cub reporter, you could sit in the front. Now, it depends on the acoustics, of course, too. You could sit in the front of the courthouse, like the Sandusky trial, the Penn State scandal, sit in the front, and that's fine and dandy. You hear, but who's the first out the door with the verdict?
Every media outlet had multiple reporters.
Right.
You had a mob of camera people downstairs. You had 3 or 4 reporters. I forget how many reporters we had there that day. You probably had most of the staff there.
Oh.
And
everybody
you would
was
have
involved
people
in
that
it.
would be in the back that go out with the verdicts.
Right.
But don't forget, then you have to go to the death penalty verdict and all of that. So it would start coming out a little bit at a time to get a little picture of where it was going. Yeah. But the story was you had to wait till the end to see if it went right down the line.
Right.
With all 12.
If you're sitting in front in the courtroom,
you weren't going to get out.
You're wondering what kind of a signal you can give
to the guy in the back. Yeah.
We used to try and plan them out of different cases over the years. Like
we had our ways.
Not smoke signals, but pretty darn close. Again, before the phones and technology.
And there was no video of Banks in the courtroom. It was all courthouse
all
sketches and everything.
Yeah.
Nothing like today.
Let me run sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say it's a different process now. So now the guilty verdict comes in, and we proceed to the penalty phase. So there's almost a whole separate trial on whether or not he gets death. So the reporters could actually run out, report the verdict, and then come back in because we're about to move into opening statements on whether or not he should get death.
And also, they were allowed to. Were you allowed to run out of the courtroom because usually the doors remain closed till the jury leaves? Correct. The jury leaves first. In other words, no one could leave the courtroom until the jury leaves. When the case is finished.
That's usually the case. Yes.
That's usually the case. Yeah. Let's go. We have another archival piece for our good friend Dave DeCosmo. Can we play the one-on-one? It's Dave DeCosmo talking with George Banks. It's sometime before the trial or during the trial, but as he's walking down the hall, Dave DeCosmo was talking to him. And Sam, yes, 1982 or 83 was no different. Reporters still stick the mic out. And here's why, folks. People say, why do you do that? For example, with Hugo Selinsky, you never knew what he was going to say. Right. And I'll never forget one time with Selinsky, he said some comment, and his attorney, Demetrius Fanny, came out after my live show at 12 o'clock and said, Andy, do me a favor. Next time I have to change my defense strategy, let me know. Because Selinsky said something that was just, he was saying negative or contrary in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. I digress. Here comes Dave's one-on-one with George Banks. Go ahead, Joey.
Mr. Banks, any comment on the sentence?
No comment, sir.
You said you found God. Are you at peace with yourself, sir?
Yes, I am.
Anything to say, Mr. Banks?
Let's go, KJ.
Boy,
Wow.
Sam, you probably
Wow.
recognize
Wow.
some of the people in the images there, and sadly, some are no longer with us. But there are some who are still maybe not working at the courthouse.
Oh, I
but
recognize
who
a
are
lot
still
of
with
people
us,
in that
thank
shot.
goodness.
Yep.
But when you see that, that's 1983.
Right.
It's 2025, so you're talking 43 years later. It's the same animal.
Yep.
It's the same
It's the exact
process.
same,
When I
right.
say animal, meaning that it's the same process of trying to get information because you don't know what they're going to say.
Look at all the sheriff's deputies and the security people. I could count probably 2 or 3 county detectives that were in that elevator with them. You had 3 or 4 deputies. You had Wilkes-Barre police downstairs. The security was strong because nobody knew if anybody else was going to take a shot at Banks.
Well, when he was holed up and not surrendering, and I was lying there on the ground, I was a little nervous. When he came out that time, I wasn't nervous at all.
Because you had the Army, Navy,
And
Marines
I had
there.
the entire army around him.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
But again, you'll notice as he walked how tranquil he was. And you mentioned that earlier, Andy. That same demeanor has been seen by all of us in the media and the public from the start to the finish. So he never really. There was no outbursts. There was no. As a matter of fact, he said very little. Listen, probably the very few words that he actually said at any time. Now, part of that, of course, was good attorney's advice. You don't say anything, but he at least responded to those couple of questions.
And you saw how calm he was.
Yes.
He had just been convicted of killing 12 people and sentenced to death 12 separate times by that jury. And he was calm as a cucumber.
It seems like, but he was calm right from the beginning. Even
Yes,
when
he
brought
was.
out on Monroe Street.
That's
Yes, he
what I
was.
said. Yeah.
And Sam, from a prosecutor standpoint, he's walking. All it takes is one juror to, for whatever reason, have sympathy, empathy, or believe there's not enough evidence. In this case, it seemed like it's overwhelming, or believe that he's mentally incompetent, and find him not guilty. You need a unanimous verdict, correct?
Correct.
You got to have 12 jurors saying guilty.
Right, and if one can't make up his or her mind, then you have to do it all over again. And it's much more difficult to do a second time because all the cats are out of the bag. Even though you give the defense attorney all your discovery, they don't know exactly what questions you're asked or what order the witnesses, what your trial strategy is. So it can be very nerve-wracking. And I think that getting that unanimous verdict is largely a function of good jury selection.
And
you got to pick people that will fairly evaluate.
I covered a
evidence.
murder trial once where they had an eyewitness to the shooting and the killing. But the jury was 11-1 to convict. Do you know why? Because the one juror was convinced if she voted guilty, somebody was going to come after her. And she wouldn't vote. So they had to retry this gentleman a second time, even though they had an eyewitness to the killing.
We're going to take a short break. Sam Sangaldoci, Dave DeCosmo, and Mark Davis, Andy Mehalshick here on the 2822 Now Mehalshick Files program. We're going to come back with our last segment and talk more about the George Banks, 43 years later, mass killing in Pennsylvania. Still the number one killing tragic record in Pennsylvania until this day. Joey, we could take the break now. And welcome back, Andy Mehalshick, along with Luzerne County DA Sam Sangaldoci, Dave DeCosmo, and Mark Davis, longtime journalist in northeastern Pennsylvania. We're talking about the George Banks mass killing, September 25th of 1982, 43 years ago this year. And think about it, half a century has gone by, guys, and we're still talking about it, still fascinated, and the numbers are still scary. The number one highest mass killing in Pennsylvania, correct, Sam?
That's correct.
And in the top 20 nationwide. Mass murders. Now, some people say mass shootings, this and that, but mass murder is still, sadly, still up there. So, Sam, we ran a couple of stories about it. As a prosecutor today, and again, you were a young kid back in the day. We were all much younger back in the day. Mm-hmm. But what do you, what do you think we've learned from George Banks? As a prosecutor now, looking back at it, and you didn't try it, of course, but I remember being in the DA's office a couple of years ago. There was the murder weapon. Mm-hmm. It was still there. Talk about what you think this case still means to you as a prosecutor and investigators moving forward.
Well, I think what comes to mind for me is, in preparing, there was a lot of talk of George Banks because of the anniversaries and things. And to be perfectly honest, other than, basic general knowledge, I didn't really know too much. So I went back into the files, which, I've been in that room a million times, and we haven't had anything on this recently. The boxes are way in the back, So we pulled them out, and to see the level of organization and what D.A. Gillespie and Larry Climo and Mike Bart had to manage, I guarantee you there had not been a case like this probably ever in Luzerne County history. To see these 16 boxes, the file folders, every witness's name. A lot of this stuff we do digitally now, so we don't prepare the same way. And to see their level of organization and how seriously they took it, and obviously you're going to take it seriously, but they left no stone unturned. Every T was crossed and every I was dotted. It's impressive to look at even 40-some years later.
Yeah.
And Dave, your recollection, we'll do more. We could talk about this for 24 hours for sure, just based on your recollections.
The case to me now is more sad than it's ever been. And that's because I said if I ever wrote a book about my news activities, the title would be, I never thought anything like that could happen around here. Because you hear that every time something happens in a different community. And that was the watchword when George Banks murdered all these people. And unfortunately, across the state and across our nation, it's now become fill in the blank. I never thought that could happen around here. So-and-so killed X amount of people on this particular day. And it's become a common news headline. And that's extremely sad.
Mark?
In 45 years, I covered a lot of cases, but this one has always stuck with me. I still have newspaper clippings in my home office. I still have the front page the day it happened, things like that. Because it wasn't lost on me as a young reporter. I was in my early 20s, only out of college a few years when this all happened. And I never wanted to take for granted what I had covered of this magnitude. And people say, how do you do it? Well, you do your job to a point. But like I said, after I did that last live shot the day it happened, that's when I broke down. Because it all came rushing out after I had completed my day's work, that it hit me as to what we had witnessed and what we'd been through. And it was the beginning of the whole year-long lead up to the trial.
And appeals to the Supreme Court and the death penalty, the incompetency, that's a whole nother story. How much time do we have left, Joy? Gabby, 2 minutes? Okay, so you can see all of our coverage on the George Banks case and stories over the years. Just go to 2822news.com. We'll have more interesting, fascinating cases on our other podcast, the Hugo Slinsky. We have cold cases, Kids for Cash. And the reason I'm mentioning that is there are so many stories that need a lot more discussion and are still topical these days. So what these podcasts allow us to do is to take a closer look and talk more about it. Sam Sangadoci, thank you again for being here today, Luzerne County DA, Dave DeCosmo, and Mark Davis. I really appreciate you guys coming in.
Anytime.
Because just the wealth of knowledge you guys have, especially with this case and overall in Luzerne County, is priceless.
Thanks
so
for the
thank
invitation.
you again.
Thank you.
2822 Now app, check it out. We have information on our website, how to download it for your friends and neighbors. Tell them all about it. Great local content. And we'll have much more interesting podcasts in the works. For now, Andy Mehalshick, I have a great, safe day, and we'll talk to you soon.